The air was thick with the scent of salt and rust when Elara stepped off the rickety pier into the small fishing village of Darnwich, a forgotten place along the North Atlantic coast that was absent from most maps. She came here chasing whispers of a story, a journalist hungry for a piece that would cement her career, but the village carried a silence that made her uneasy from the first moment. The sea lapped gently at the shoreline, but its rhythm felt wrong, like something beneath the surface was controlling it, breathing with each subtle shift. The villagers avoided her eyes, muttering to one another in hushed tones, their weathered faces marked by fear they did not name. She should have turned back, but ambition and curiosity pressed her forward. Elara rented a room in a crumbling inn that smelled of mildew and damp wood. The owner, a gaunt woman with gray hair braided tightly, barely spoke as she handed over the key. On the wall behind her hung a faded painting of the sea, except the waves seemed alive, eyes hidden in the foam, staring back. Elara dismissed it as her imagination, though her heart beat faster than it should have. That night, she dreamed of drowning, of being pulled under by unseen hands. When she woke, the window was wide open though she swore she had locked it, and salt water pooled on the wooden floorboards. The next morning, Elara began her investigation. She had read fragments in old archives of disappearances linked to Darnwich, seamen who never returned, and rumors of strange rites along the coast. She expected folklore, exaggeration, and ghost stories. What she found instead were walls of silence. When she approached the fishermen on the shore, they turned their backs. When she asked about the disappearances, the innkeeper refused to answer. Only one man, an old fisherman named Corbin, finally spoke to her after much persuasion. His eyes were glassy and unfocused, as if he had seen too much. "It lives beneath us," he rasped, pointing a trembling finger toward the sea. "We feed it or it takes what it wants." Elara pressed him for more, but before he could explain, another villager dragged him away, glaring at her with a hostility that chilled her blood. That night, she returned to her room and found a dead fish placed on her pillow, its mouth stretched unnaturally wide as if it had screamed before dying. She should have fled, but instead, she felt the lure of the story tightening around her like a net. Days passed, and Elara uncovered fragments. She heard chants in the distance during the night, voices rising and falling with the waves. She saw villagers carrying lanterns toward the cliffs, disappearing into the mist. Once, she followed, keeping low in the shadows, and discovered a cave hidden by the tide. Inside, the villagers stood in a circle around a pool of black water that glistened though no light touched it. Their voices formed words in a language she did not know, and from the water rose something vast and shapeless, its form rippling like liquid shadow, with tendrils that reached out as if tasting the air. Elara's scream nearly escaped her, but she covered her mouth just in time, retreating before she was seen. She could not shake the sight. The next day, she confronted the innkeeper, demanding answers. The woman's face twisted with something between pity and terror. "Curiosity will drown you," she whispered. "Leave while you can." But Elara could not leave. She needed to know what the villagers served, what rose from the cave. The story had her, body and soul. The deeper she dug, the more the sea itself seemed to turn against her. Waves crashed higher when she walked near the shore. The cries of gulls followed her, harsh and mocking. In her dreams, the black water returned, and voices called her name, coaxing her to join them beneath the waves. One night, she woke to find her bed soaked, seawater dripping from the ceiling though no leak existed. And standing at the edge of her room was the shadow of something tall and formless, its reflection shimmering like water though no glass was near. Elara began to lose her grip on time. Days bled into nights. Her notes became frantic scrawls, ink smeared with drops of salt. She saw Corbin again, his face pale, his skin clammy. He begged her to leave. "It knows you now," he said, voice cracking. "It has tasted your fear. Once it chooses, you cannot escape." His warning only deepened her resolve, though dread gnawed at her heart. The turning point came when Elara returned to the hidden cave. She needed proof, photographs, evidence. Armed with her camera, she crept inside at low tide. The air was heavy, charged with something electric. The pool of black water pulsed as though alive. She raised her camera, but before she could take a shot, the water erupted. A shape burst forth, towering, its form ever-shifting, sometimes resembling a monstrous serpent, sometimes a faceless human form, sometimes nothing she could name. Tendrils lashed out, splashing her with icy water that burned her skin. A voice filled her mind, ancient and terrible. "You are mine." Elara fled, heart pounding, but the cave mouth had closed with the rising tide. Water rushed in, icy and relentless. She scrambled against the rocks, desperate, as the water climbed higher. Just when she thought she would drown, rough hands seized her. Corbin dragged her out through a narrow passage she had not seen before. Gasping, coughing, she collapsed on the shore. Corbin leaned close, his eyes wide with fear. "Now you see," he whispered. "Now you understand." From that night on, Elara was marked. The villagers watched her not with suspicion but with resignation, as if her fate had already been sealed. She tried to leave Darnwich, packing her things and heading for the road out, but every path led her back to the sea. It was as if the town itself shifted, guiding her steps toward the shoreline. Panic set in, but so did a strange compulsion. The sea whispered, promising knowledge, power, answers to questions she had never dared to ask. She felt it in her bones, in her blood, pulling her closer each day. Corbin tried to help her resist. He spoke of the ancient pact. The villagers offered sacrifices to the being beneath the surface in exchange for protection. Storms spared Darnwich, ships returned with full nets, but the price was lives. Sometimes volunteers, sometimes chosen. "It has chosen you," he said, voice breaking. "There is no fighting it, only surrender." But Elara would not surrender. She planned to expose the truth, to bring outsiders, to end the cycle. Her last hope was her recordings, her notes, the photographs she had finally managed to capture of the cave and the shadow rising. She hid them in her bag, determined to escape at dawn. Yet the sea had other plans. That night, the storm came. The wind screamed like a chorus of the damned, tearing at the roofs. Waves taller than houses crashed against the cliffs. Elara tried to flee inland, but the streets flooded, salt water rushing in from every direction. The villagers gathered, chanting, their eyes wide and unblinking, faces lit by lightning. At the center of the square, the ground split, water surging upward. From the depths, the being rose, vast and endless, its form blotting out the sky. Tendrils wrapped around houses, pulling them down as easily as toys. Its voice thundered in every mind. One must go beneath. The villagers turned to Elara. Corbin tried to shield her, but the tendrils swept him aside, flinging him broken to the stones. Elara screamed, fighting as the water closed around her legs, dragging her toward the square. The chanting grew louder, a frenzy of devotion. She clawed at the cobblestones, nails breaking, but the pull was irresistible. In her last moments above the surface, she looked up and saw the villagers' faces, not fearful, but serene, as though watching a promise fulfilled. The sea swallowed her whole. Darkness engulfed her, pressure crushing her lungs. But she did not die. Instead, she descended deeper and deeper, past reefs of bone, past forests of kelp that writhed like grasping hands, into the abyss where light could not reach. There, the being waited. Its form coiled around her, vast and endless, its many eyes glowing like suns in the black. "You are mine now," it whispered, and something inside her broke, or perhaps awoke. She no longer knew where she ended and the sea began. When the storm cleared, Darnwich stood silent once more. The villagers returned to their lives, nets heavy with fish, homes spared from ruin. The sacrifice had been made, the pact fulfilled. In the inn, Elara's room stood empty, her notes gone, her camera missing. But sometimes, when the waves crashed at night, the villagers swore they heard her voice carried on the wind, calling from beneath the surface, neither alive nor dead, but part of the endless, hungry sea.